In this picture, I've blown up just the upper corner of the picture we saw in the last video. I want to concentrate just on a single network here. And I'm going to define a term called the intranet. Now, the intranet is just the same as a network, so why don't we just call it a network? Well, because it does have one special characteristic that makes it an intranet, and that is that it uses the TCP/IP protocol suite. If it's good enough for the internet, why not use it on a single network? And so when we use TCP/IP protocol suite, now we call this an intranet, because we often host web pages and all sorts of things that are just in this private network that are not out there for public use. Now, there are several things about an intranet that I want to point out. One is that a more generic term is a LAN, or local area network. However, be very careful here, because a LAN doesn't necessarily use the TCP/IP protocol suite. It may be using one of the other protocol suites that are out there. There are many others: AppleTalk, IPX, SPX. NetWare, for example, was a company that had for many years sort of a monopoly on protocol suites before the internet was around. And so those exist. So a LAN can be any protocol suite, including a TCP/IP protocol suite, but it's a more generic or umbrella term for a local network like this. Local area network is what it stands for. Sometimes we just call this a private network, because it is not, we can have web pages and so on that are not shared out on the internet. So we sometimes call this just a private network. Of course, because this is a network and because it's on one side of the router, it uses a contiguous set of IP addresses. Now, these IP addresses are usually a special kind. They are usually taken from a set of private IP addresses, and we'll get into these much more later on in the course. However, just know that among all of the addresses in the IP protocol, there are sets of contiguous addresses that are set aside for private use that are not used on the internet. They are used by a company for itself. However, another company may use the same set of private addresses. Well, now wait a minute. If they have the same addresses, how can I talk across the internet from one to the other? Well, the answer is that outside of this network, this entire network has one public IP address, and something called NAT, or Network Address Translation, translates from the private address to the public address, and then back again to the private address. And we're going to talk about NAT quite a bit more in the next video, so prepare for that. We will talk about it in much greater detail. But NAT translates from private addresses to a public address, and then back from that single public address to the various private addresses in that network.